The night Oliver Vale returned to Ashford Manor, three sisters made the same mistake without knowing it. Each believed she was the only woman who loved him. Teriya saw him first from the balcony, standing beneath the golden lights of the estate with rainwater shining on his black coat, and for one reckless second she forgot that Oliver was the son of one of the wealthiest businessmen in the city, the heir to the Vale Empire, and the kind of man whose future was usually decided by people far more powerful than love. Oriyan watched him from across the ballroom and felt her heart tighten because she knew something her sisters did not. Oliver had once held her hand beneath an old oak tree and promised that if life ever separated them, he would still find his way back. Pearl, the youngest, stood beside the staircase, pretending to scroll through her phone while secretly memorizing every movement he made, every smile he gave, every woman who dared to stand too close to him. None of the sisters spoke about what they felt. Teriya was proud and sharp-minded, the eldest, a woman who had spent her life believing that revealing weakness was the same as surrendering power. Oriyan was quieter, softer on the surface but stronger than anyone understood, and her love for Oliver had begun years earlier when they were both young enough to believe that promises could survive families, money, and ambition. Pearl was impulsive, romantic, and dangerously devoted to the idea that Oliver might someday look at her the way he looked at Oriyan, though she had never admitted that she had noticed the difference. Their mother had raised them to protect one another, but love had placed a locked door inside each of their hearts, and behind every door was the same name, Oliver. Oliver himself knew more than they imagined. He had seen Teriya's lingering glances, Pearl's nervous smiles, and Orion's silence whenever he entered a room, but his heart had chosen only one of them. Oriyan. He had loved her before he fully understood what love was, and the years had only made that feeling more dangerous. His father, Victor Vale, had other plans. Victor had spent decades building a business empire through cold decisions, calculated marriages, political connections, and loyalty that could be bought or destroyed. To him, Oliver's future was not a personal matter. It was an investment. Victor wanted his son to marry Elena Vale, the daughter of his younger brother, Richard. The marriage would strengthen the family's control over the company and prevent their fortune from leaving the bloodline. Elena had grown up beside Oliver, attended the same private schools, appeared beside him at family events, and quietly built an entire future inside her imagination where Oliver belonged to her. She did not consider Oriyan a rival at first. She considered her an inconvenience. But when she discovered that Oliver loved Oriyan, something inside Elena changed. It began with jealousy, but jealousy was only the first step toward revenge. Victor called Oliver into his office 3 days after the party. The room was filled with dark wood, expensive paintings, and the kind of silence that made even confident people lower their voices. Victor stood beside the window and said, "You will marry Elena." Oliver laughed once because he believed his father was joking, but the expression on Victor's face made the laughter disappear. "I love Oriyan," Oliver answered. Victor turned slowly. Love is a luxury for people who have nothing to lose. Oliver stepped closer. "Then perhaps I would rather lose everything." That sentence changed the course of his life. Victor froze his bank accounts, removed him from several company positions, and warned him that if he continued seeing Oriyan, the Buffet family would suffer consequences they could not imagine. Oliver believed his father was bluffing until Teriya's small business suddenly lost its largest investor. Pearl's university scholarship was placed under investigation, and their father's medical treatment was delayed because an anonymous financial sponsor withdrew support. The sisters had no proof, but Oliver knew exactly who was responsible. He begged Oriyan to leave the city with him, but she refused. "If we run now," she whispered, "your father will spend the rest of his life proving that he can destroy us." Their relationship became a war fought in silence. Oliver continued seeing Oriyan secretly, meeting her in old cafes, empty gardens, and abandoned sections of the city where cameras and family friends were unlikely to find them. Teriya noticed Oriyan leaving the house late one night and followed her. What she discovered shattered the first secret. From behind a stone wall, Teriya watched Oliver kiss Oriyan. She did not interrupt them. She walked home alone with rain falling over her hair and anger burning behind her eyes. The man she loved had chosen her sister. The next morning, Teriya sat at breakfast across from Oriyan and smiled as if nothing had happened. That was the moment the first crack appeared in the bond between the sisters. Pearl's secret emerged soon after. She found an old box hidden inside Orion's wardrobe containing letters from Oliver, photographs, and a small silver pendant he had given Oriyan years ago. Pearl read enough to understand the truth. She wanted to hate Oriyan, but she hated herself more for wishing the letters belonged to her. Still, none of them confessed. The three sisters continued living under the same roof, sharing meals, memories, and family jokes while hiding the one truth that could destroy them. Elena, however, was watching. She had hired someone to follow Oliver, and when photographs of Oliver and Oriyan reached her hands, she did not cry. She smiled. "If he wants her," Elena said softly, tearing one photograph in half, "then I will make him regret choosing her." Her first attack came at a charity dinner when rumors began spreading that Oriyan had been secretly involved with Oliver for money. Anonymous messages appeared online. Edited photographs made their relationship look suspicious. Business associates began whispering that the Buffet sisters were trying to enter the Vale family through manipulation. Oriyan wanted to fight, but Oliver refused to let her face the scandal alone. For the first time, he publicly took her hand in front of cameras and announced that she was the woman he loved. Victor's face turned pale with rage. Elena stared at Oriyan as if she had just declared war. Teriya and Pearl watched from the edge of the room, each heartbroken in a different way, but when reporters began insulting Oriyan, both sisters stepped forward beside her. Love had divided them, but humiliation reminded them that they were still sisters. That night, the four women stood beneath the same roof, unaware that the battle for Oliver's future had only begun, and somewhere across the city, Elena opened a notebook, wrote Orion's name at the top of an empty page, and began planning a revenge that would eventually destroy far more than a marriage. Oliver lost almost everything before he finally won the right to marry Oriyan, and by the time their wedding day arrived, victory no longer felt simple. Victor had disowned him publicly, Richard had cut off contact, Elena had transformed from a rejected woman into a patient enemy, and the Vale family newspapers had published stories suggesting that Oliver had abandoned his responsibilities because of a woman who had manipulated him. The truth was simpler and more dangerous. Oliver had chosen love over obedience. Teriya and Pearl were the first to stand beside Oriyan when preparations began, though the tension between the sisters had not disappeared. One evening, while choosing flowers, Teriya finally placed her hands on the table and said, "I loved him too." Oriyan stopped breathing for a moment. Pearl looked away. Then Pearl whispered, "So did I." The silence that followed was painful, but it was also honest. Years of hidden emotions came rushing into the room. Teriya admitted that she had hated Oriyan after discovering the truth. Pearl confessed that she had sometimes imagined what would happen if Oliver changed his mind. Oriyan cried because she had spent years feeling guilty without understanding why her sisters occasionally became distant. Yet instead of destroying them, the truth forced them to confront what secrecy had created. "We cannot choose who he loves," Oriyan said through tears. "But we can choose whether we lose each other because of it." Teriya looked at her younger sister for a long time before taking her hand. Pearl joined them. Their love for Oliver had been different, but their bond as sisters had existed long before he entered their lives. They promised that no matter what happened, they would not allow one man to turn them into enemies. It was a promise that would soon be tested in ways none of them could predict. Oliver and Oriyan married in a small ceremony outside the city. There were no members of the Vale family, no business partners, and no expensive displays designed to impress society. The sky was grey, the wind was cold, and Oriyan wore a simple dress that Teriya had helped choose. Pearl cried before the ceremony even began. Oliver looked at Oriyan and said words that were not rehearsed, words that came from every year they had spent fighting against a future designed by other people. They tried to tell me who I belonged to, he said. But every road I took brought me back to you. Oriyan smiled through tears, and for one brief moment, it seemed that love had actually won. Elena watched the ceremony from a distance. She had found the location through someone inside Oliver's former security team, and when the couple kissed, she did not scream or create a scene. She simply turned away and began building the next stage of her revenge. Elena's greatest weapon was patience. She knew that attacking Oliver directly would only make Oriyan stronger. Instead, she attacked the people around them. Teriya's business was accused of financial fraud after forged documents were anonymously delivered to the authorities. Pearl began receiving threatening messages containing private photographs that had been taken without her knowledge. Oriyan's father was approached by strangers who offered him money to convince his daughter to leave Oliver. Every disaster appeared unrelated, but Oliver understood the pattern. Elena wanted them exhausted, suspicious, and afraid. The pressure became unbearable when Oliver discovered that someone inside his new company was stealing confidential information and framing him for the losses. Victor publicly blamed his son, and investors began demanding Oliver's removal. Oriyan begged him not to fight every battle alone. "Your father taught you that weakness means asking for help," as she said. "But you are not your father." Oliver allowed Teriya and Pearl to help, and together the sisters uncovered evidence linking the attacks to several shell companies connected to Elena's private financial advisor. Before they could expose her, however, Elena struck harder. Pearl disappeared for 12 hours. Her phone was found near the river, and a message was sent to Oliver: "Leave the city and abandon Oriyan, or Pearl would disappear permanently." Oliver wanted to go to the police, but Teriya believed Elena had someone monitoring them. Oriyan blamed herself because every attack seemed to lead back to her marriage. "Maybe if I leave," as she said, "this ends." Oliver's answer was immediate. "If you leave, she wins." Together, they rescued Pearl from an abandoned property owned indirectly by one of Elena's companies, but the rescue came at a cost. Oliver was attacked while trying to protect Pearl and spent several days in the hospital. Elena expected Oriyan to break. Instead, something changed inside her. The gentlewoman who had spent years avoiding conflict began collecting evidence. She met former employees, found hidden accounts, and recorded conversations. For the first time, Elena realized that Oriyan was not the helpless woman she had imagined. Furious, Elena approached Victor and revealed that she had been working against Oliver. Victor was horrified, but Elena had saved copies of documents proving that Victor himself had previously pressured Oliver and used his business influence against the Buffet family. She threatened to expose him unless he helped her destroy the marriage. Victor finally understood what obsession had created. He had spent his life controlling Oliver's future, and in doing so, he had helped create the monster standing before him. He refused Elena's demand, but his refusal came too late. Elena released false evidence suggesting that Oliver had been secretly meeting another woman. The story spread through the media, and photographs, carefully manipulated, showed Oliver entering a hotel with someone who was not Oriyan. Oriyan wanted to believe him, but exhaustion had weakened her trust. For the first time since their marriage, she asked, "Tell me the truth, Oliver. Is there anything left that I don't know?" Oliver's silence lasted only a second, but after everything they had endured, 1 second was enough to hurt her. He had been meeting a private investigator to gather evidence against Elena, but he had kept it secret because he feared Elena had people watching Oriyan. His silence looked like guilt. Oriyan left their home that night. Elena had finally succeeded in creating distance between them, but she underestimated the three sisters. Teriya confronted Oliver and told him that if he truly loved Oriyan, he needed to stop treating her like someone who had to be protected from the truth. Pearl tracked down the investigator, found the original photographs, and helped expose the manipulation. When Oliver finally found Oriyan, she was standing alone near the same old oak tree where their relationship had first become serious. "I'm tired," as she told him. "I'm tired of being your reason for fighting everyone." Oliver stepped closer. "Then don't be the reason. Be the person I come home to after the fight." Oriyan closed her eyes. She forgave him, but neither of them knew that forgiveness would not save them from the final act of Elena's revenge. Because Elena had already decided that if Oliver and Oriyan could not be separated by fear, scandal, betrayal, or blood, then she would take away the one thing Oliver could never replace, Oriyan herself. Elena's final plan began with a lie so believable that even Victor could not immediately recognize it. She contacted Oriyan and claimed that she possessed evidence proving Oliver's life was in danger. According to Elena, one of Victor's former business enemies had hired people to kill him, and Oliver had been targeted because of the investigation into Elena's crimes. Oriyan no longer trusted Elena, but fear can make intelligent people walk into places they would otherwise avoid. Elena sent photographs of Oliver being watched by unfamiliar men, and although some of the images were real, their meaning had been carefully twisted. Oriyan did not tell Oliver because she wanted to confirm the information first. She contacted Teriya and Pearl, and the three sisters agreed to meet Elena at an old warehouse outside the city. It was supposed to be a trap for Elena. Instead, Elena had prepared a trap for all of them. Teriya noticed something wrong the moment they entered. There were no security cameras, no workers, and no sign of the documents Elena had promised. Pearl reached for her phone, but the signal disappeared. Elena appeared from the darkness wearing a calm expression that frightened Oriyan more than anger ever could. "You always believed you won because Oliver chose you," Elena said. Oriyan stepped in front of her sisters. "No. I believed love was not something you could steal." Elena laughed quietly. "Then perhaps you should have learned sooner that everything can be taken." What followed happened faster than any of them could process. A confrontation became a struggle. The sisters tried to escape, and Elena revealed that she had arranged the entire scene to look like a violent attack connected to Oliver's business enemies. Oliver, meanwhile, had discovered Orion's location through a message Pearl had managed to send before her phone died. He arrived with police officers and Victor close behind, but by then the warehouse had become chaos. Elena had poured fuel across part of the building, planning to destroy evidence and create an accident nobody could fully explain. Oliver entered before the officers could stop him. He found Teriya injured near a doorway, Pearl trapped behind fallen metal, and Oriyan standing across the room with Elena. "Oliver!" Oriyan screamed, and the sound of her voice made him run toward her. Elena saw him coming and made the final decision of her ruined life. She reached for a weapon she had brought to frighten Oriyan, but in the struggle between them, everything became confused. Oliver shouted. Pearl cried. Teriya tried to move despite her injury. A single violent moment changed all of their lives. Oriyan was struck while protecting Oliver. For a second, nobody understood what had happened. Then Oliver saw the blood spreading across her clothes. The warehouse became silent inside his mind. He caught her before she reached the floor, calling her name again and again as if repetition could force her to remain alive. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Oriyan, please. We survived everything. You cannot leave now." Oriyan touched his face with a trembling hand. Her sisters surrounded her, crying openly, and even Elena stood frozen, staring at what her revenge had finally created. Oriyan looked at Teriya and Pearl. "Don't let this end us," she whispered. Then she looked at Oliver. Her lips moved, but her voice was almost gone. "You found me." Oliver pressed his forehead against hers. "I will always find you." Those were the last words she heard. Oriyan died before the ambulance reached the hospital. The newspapers later described the tragedy as the collapse of a wealthy family, a revenge conspiracy, and a criminal investigation, but none of those words could describe what happened to Oliver after that night. At first, he refused to accept her death. He returned to their home and left her clothes exactly where they were. He set a place for her at dinner. He answered questions nobody had asked. Sometimes Teriya and Pearl found him sitting beneath the old oak tree, speaking to the empty space beside him as if Oriyan had merely gone somewhere and would soon return. Victor tried to bring him home, but Oliver no longer recognized the meaning of home. His business collapsed around him because he stopped attending meetings. Money became meaningless. The empire his father had once considered more important than love now belonged to a son who could barely remember what day it was. Elena was arrested, but punishment did not bring her peace. At first she screamed that Oriyan had ruined everything. Then she began claiming that Oliver would forgive her. Later, inside the silence of her cell, her mind started breaking under the weight of what she had done. She spoke to people who were not there. She sometimes called herself Oriyan. Other times she laughed and insisted that the wedding had never happened. The doctors described severe psychological collapse, but Teriya believed Elena's true punishment was simpler. She had spent her life wanting Oliver's love and had succeeded only in becoming the reason his world died. Years passed, but the damage remained. Pearl rebuilt her life slowly, though she never stopped carrying guilt for surviving. Teriya became stronger than she had ever been, caring for what remained of her family and visiting Oliver whenever he allowed her near. The sisters had once hidden their love for the same man, but after Orion's death, that secret no longer mattered. They had lost a sister, and Oliver had lost the only person who had ever made him willing to abandon everything. On some evenings, Oliver disappeared from the care facility and walked alone toward the oak tree. The staff would find him there hours later, holding Orion's old silver pendant in his hand. "She told me to find her," he would say. "I'm still looking." One cold morning, Teriya found him sitting beneath the tree before sunrise. His hair had turned grey long before its time, and his eyes carried the distant expression of someone living in a place nobody else could reach. She sat beside him and asked softly, "Do you know who I am?" Oliver looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled faintly. "You're Orion's sister." Teriya nodded, fighting tears. "Yes." Oliver looked toward the empty space beside him. "She'll be here soon." Teriya did not correct him. She simply sat there while the morning light slowly covered the ground. Somewhere else, Elena remained trapped inside a mind broken by revenge, haunted by the name of the woman she had tried to erase. And beneath the old oak tree, Oliver continued waiting for a love that had survived wealth, family, betrayal, scandal, violence, and death, yet could not return to him. In the end, nobody truly won. Teriya lost the future she once imagined, Pearl lost the innocence she had carried into adulthood, Victor lost his son to the consequences of his own ambition, Elena lost her sanity to the revenge she believed would make her powerful, and Oliver lost the woman for whom he had sacrificed everything. The three sisters had once loved the same man in silence, but only Oriyan had been loved by him in return, and that love became both the greatest victory and the deepest tragedy of their lives. Oliver remained beneath the tree until his final days, speaking to the wind as though it carried messages from Oriyan, while Elena lived inside the ruins of her own mind, proving that revenge rarely destroys only the person it targets. Sometimes, it burns every hand that carries the flame.